We all think we know the sound of a heartbeat, right? That simple, familiar rhythm. But what if there's a whole hidden language buried inside those sounds? Today, we're going to decode it.
All right, so this short explainer on acoustic cardiography has really been made to answer some questions we've gotten from a number of readers. So what we've done is pull out some key information from the published research that really summarizes just how useful this technology is in the clinic.
So let's just think about that for a second. What if, beyond that familiar lub-dub, the simple sounds of our hearts contain a secret language? A language that, honestly, we've struggled to fully understand. Until now. One that could give us powerful new insights into our own health.
Okay, so our story really begins with a pretty common medical challenge, a diagnostic gray zone where getting a clear answer is just really tough.
Picture this. A patient shows up. They're feeling short of breath. One of the very first tools a doctor will probably reach for is a specific blood test to check for signs of heart strain.
Yeah, this test measures something called B-type natriuretic peptide, or just BNP for short. You can think of it like a little SOS signal the heart sends out when it's being overworked. Now, if the level is super high, that's a strong sign that the heart's main pumping chamber is struggling, what doctors call left ventricular dysfunction. And if the level is really low, well, that kind of heart failure is probably off the table.
But here is the problem. For a huge number of patients, the results land somewhere in the middle. They fall into this gray zone. And when that happens, the test doesn't give a clear yes or no answer, which leaves doctors and patients kind of stuck in limbo.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because this slide quantifies that uncertainty perfectly. This data comes from a 2007 paper by Dr. Michel Zuber and his colleagues, and it shows the real power of the BNP test. We're looking at something called the positive likelihood ratio. All you need to know is that a ratio over 10 is excellent for confirming a diagnosis. And you can see, for results over 500, the power is great. But look at what happens in that critical gray zone. The ratio just plummets to 2.3. That is very low diagnostic power, exactly when you need clarity the most.
So, with the standard test falling short, researchers started to wonder, could we find the answers we need by just listening more closely to the heart itself? And this brings us right back to that foundational study by Zuber's team. They set out to test a really specific idea. Could combining the standard electrical data from an ECG with high-fidelity acoustic data, the actual sounds of the heart, clear up all the confusion in that gray zone?
The technology they used to do this is called acoustic cardiography. It's essentially a superpowered digital stethoscope combined with an ECG. It doesn't just let you hear the heart sounds, it records them, digitizes them, and then analyzes them with some really smart algorithms, looking for subtle patterns that are just impossible for the human ear to quantify on its own.
So, remember this number. In that ambiguous gray zone, the standard blood test alone gives us a diagnostic likelihood ratio of just 2.3. Not very helpful.
Now look at this. When Zuber's team added the data from acoustic cardiography for those same patients, the likelihood ratio jumped from 2.3 to 69. That's not just an improvement, that's an absolute game changer. It takes a test with very low power and turns it into one with truly exceptional diagnostic certainty.
So how does it work? Well, one of the key metrics, detailed in a 2008 review by Dr. Paul Earn, is something called electromechanical activation time, or EMAT. It's all about measuring the precise tiny delay between the heart's electrical go signal and the mechanical thump of the valve closing.
Think of it like flipping a light switch. There's an electrical signal when you flip it, and then a split second later, the bulb actually lights up. EMAT is that tiny delay. A healthy, strong heart builds pressure really fast, so the delay is super short. But a weaker heart, one that's struggling with dysfunction, takes longer to build that pressure. That delay, the EMAT, gets longer. And acoustic cardiography can measure this delay down to the millisecond. It's incredible.
This technology was incredibly promising in the clinic, for sure. But the story doesn't end there. Now it's moving from the hospital right into the home.
What started as a clinical diagnostic tool has now been miniaturized and transformed into a simple wearable patch that patients can use right at home.
And to see this in action, we can look at a very recent study led by Dr. Ran Liu. His team gave these wearable devices to patients who were recovering from a major heart valve replacement procedure known as TAVR. Their goal was to track how the heart muscle was healing and remodeling itself after the surgery, all from the comfort of the patient's own homes.
And this chart just shows you what they found so brilliantly. Before the procedure, over half the patients had severe remodeling, which means the heart muscle had become thick and strained from working too hard. But look at the change over time. By 6 months, that number dropped to 22%, and by 12 months, it was down to 19%. This is a visual representation of the heart healing itself, all tracked by that simple wearable patch.
And here's the crucial point. The data from the simple, at-home wearable device was just as accurate as the results from a full in-hospital echocardiogram, which is the gold standard. This proves that technology is not only convenient, but it's also robust and reliable for monitoring serious heart conditions remotely.
So what does all this mean for the future of keeping our hearts healthy? Well, it represents a fundamental shift. We're moving towards more precise diagnoses that cut through all that ambiguity. We're enabling accessible monitoring that doesn't require a trip to the hospital. And maybe most importantly, we're changing our perspective from a single snapshot in the doctor's office to a continuous, lifelong movie of our heart's health. Ultimately, by learning to listen to the heart's hidden language with digital precision, we can make healthcare way more proactive. We can catch problems earlier and track recovery more effectively, moving away from uncertainty and towards truly personalized care. And that leaves us with a fascinating question to think about. Based on this technology, the answer seems to be a resounding yes. Thanks for joining this explainer.
So how did you identify this place for the camp? It's one of the most remotest areas?
One of the most remote. And that was our plan to establish a hospital.
Yeah.
Even there is no network, even there is no emergency caretaker system.
Good day.